Have you ever noticed how the most powerful people in the room are never the loudest? They don't explain. They don't defend. They don't chase. They withdraw. And suddenly, everything changes. The air tightens. The energy shifts. People feel uneasy. They start replaying conversations, questioning themselves, wondering what they did wrong. Not because anything was said, but because something was withheld. Now ask yourself, something uncomfortable. What would happen if you stopped reacting? If you didn't reply immediately? If you didn't explain yourself? If you didn't rush to fix, soothe, or prove? What would happen if you chose silence instead of emotional reflex? Because that is where real power begins. Most people believe power comes from action, from speaking up, from asserting, from reacting quickly. They are wrong. True power comes from containment, from knowing when not to move, when not to speak, when not to offer yourself. And this is exactly what you were never taught. From early childhood, you were conditioned to be available, available to respond, available to please, available to adapt. You learned that love came from responsiveness, that approval came from compliance, that safety came from being easy to reach. So you became quick, emotionally quick. You reply fast. You react fast. You explain fast. You forgive fast. You don't pause. You don't assess. You don't withdraw. And people noticed, not consciously, instinctively, because the psyche recognizes patterns faster than logic. They learned that you are reachable, that you are predictable, that you will respond if they push the right button. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that what is predictable becomes controllable, not through force, but through expectation. When someone knows how you will react before you do, they don't need power over you. They already have it. And this is where most emotional manipulation begins. Not in cruelty, not in aggression, but in familiarity. You are known, mapped, anticipated. Your emotional rhythm is no longer yours. It belongs to the people who learned how to trigger it. Think carefully. Who in your life can disturb your inner state with one message, one tone, one silence, one look? Who can ruin your peace without raising their voice? That is not intimacy. That is access. And access is dangerous when it is unlimited, because unlimited access invites unconscious control. You don't even notice it happening. You call it connection. You call it loyalty. You call it being kind. But underneath, it is self-abandonment. Jung called this the persona, the mask you wear, to be accepted, to be loved, to belong. And this mask is always available, always agreeable, always responsive, always present. But the persona comes at a cost, because every time you respond when you don't want to, you teach the world that your inner boundaries are negotiable. Every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you teach others that they are entitled to your inner world. Every time you react emotionally, you leak psychic energy. And Jung was clear about this. Psychic energy is not infinite. It is not renewable, without consequence. It is the fuel of your identity. And most people are leaking it constantly. They wake up already drained, already tense, already reactive, not because life is hard, but because they have trained themselves to be open systems. Everything enters. Nothing is filtered. Opinions, demands, emotions, drama. And by the end of the day, they feel empty. They can't explain why. They say they're tired. But rest doesn't fix it. Because it's not physical fatigue. It's energetic depletion. You are exhausted because too many people have access to you. And here is the part, if you want to admit, people don't respect what is always available, not because they are evil, but because the psyche devalues abundance. What is always there feels replaceable, predictable, emotionally cheap. This is why the more you give, the less you are valued. The more you explain, the less you are heard. The more you react, the less impact you have. And this creates a brutal paradox. You try harder, You give more. You show up faster. And the more you do, the more invisible you become. Until one day, you feel resentment, quiet resentment. You feel used, misunderstood, unseen, but you don't say anything because your persona doesn't allow it. You don't want conflict. You don't want rejection. You don't want to seem cold. So you swallow it. And this swallowed emotion does not disappear. It sinks. It becomes tension, anxiety, fatigue. Jung warned about this. What is not expressed consciously returns unconsciously as irritability, as withdrawal, as numbness, or as sudden explosions that surprise even you. But here is the deeper truth. Your reactions are not spontaneous. They are conditioned. You react because your nervous system has learned that reaction equals safety. If I respond, I stay connected. If I explain, I avoid misunderstanding. If I engage, I won't be abandoned. This is not weakness. It is survival. And opportunistic people sense this immediately, not intellectually, energetically. They feel that you don't know how to guard yourself. They notice that you fill silences, that you soothe discomfort, that you rush to repair. So they let you. They don't need to ask. They simply lean. And you carry. They unload. You absorb. They provoke. You respond. They disappear. You wait. And you call this relationship. But Jung would call this projection. They are not relating to you. They are relating to the function you serve, the role you play, the emotional service you provide. And as long as you keep reacting the same way, the dynamic remains intact. This is why withdrawal is terrifying, not just for them, but for you. Because when you stop reacting, you interrupt the pattern, and patterns hate interruption. The moment you delay a response, something shifts. The moment you choose silence instead of explanation, something destabilizes. People feel it instantly. They may not say it, but their behavior changes. They text again. They question. They poke. They try to provoke. The old response, because your silence, creates uncertainty, and uncertainty threatens control. This is why your withdrawal creates emotional chaos, not because you are wrong, but because you removed predictability. And predictability is what made you manageable. This is why people get irritated. When you stop being available, they accuse you of changing, of becoming distant, cold, arrogant. But what they are really saying is, you no longer function the way you used to. And that is not a flaw. That is growth. Jung called this the beginning of individuation. The moment you stop living as a reflection of others. The moment you reclaim your energy from external demands. But individuation does not begin with confidence. It begins with discomfort. Because when you withdraw, you feel guilt. You feel selfish. You feel wrong. Not because you are, but because your psyche was trained to equate availability with worth. You believe that if you are not accessible, you will be forgotten. That if you don't respond, you will be replaced. That if you don't engage, you will be abandoned. And sometimes, this fear is confirmed. People leave. They distance themselves. They lose interest. But here is the revelation. Those people were never attached to you. They were attached to your accessibility. And when that disappears, so do they. This is not loss. This is filtration. Your silence acts as a psychological mirror. It reveals who was there for you and who was there for what you provided. Jung said that everything that irritates us about others leads us to ourselves. But the reverse is also true. Everything that irritates others about your withdrawal reveals their dependence. Watch closely. Who becomes anxious when you don't reply? Who becomes hostile when you don't explain? Who escalates emotionally when you remain calm? This is not coincidence. This is exposure. Your unavailability forces people to confront their own emptiness, and most cannot tolerate it. They need you to regulate their emotions, to validate their identity, to carry what they refuse to face. So when you stop, they panic, and panic often disguises itself as criticism. This is why withdrawal feels dangerous, because it attracts backlash. But Jung understood this too. He knew that every individuation process passes through isolation, not pathological isolation, sacred isolation, a withdrawal from the collective, to hear your own voice. Because as long as you are always responding, you cannot listen. And as long as you cannot listen, you cannot know yourself. This is why silence is not weakness. It is containment. It is the refusal to leak energy into dynamics that do not nourish you. It is the decision to observe before engaging. And observation is power, because when you observe, you see patterns, you see manipulation, you see repetition, you see who benefits from your reaction. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is where your old life begins to dissolve. You stop explaining. You stop justifying. You stop reacting immediately. And something strange happens. Your presence becomes heavier. Your words carry more weight because there are fewer of them. Your silence becomes noticeable, not empty, dense, charged. This is what Jung meant by psychic containment. Energy held creates gravity. Energy leaked creates exhaustion. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not everyone deserves your immediacy. Not everyone deserves your emotional labor. And the moment you internalize this, the game changes. But before we go further, you must understand one thing. Withdrawal is not escape. It is not avoidance. It is not fear. When it comes from awareness, it is sovereignty. And in the next section, we will go deeper into psychic energy itself, into why your reactions are draining you, into how manipulators feed on predictability, and why conserving your energy terrifies those who benefited from your exhaustion. Because once you stop reacting, you are no longer controllable. And that is where real freedom begins. When you stop reacting, you don't just change behavior, you change energy flow. And this is where most people misunderstand what is really happening. They think silence is a communication tactic. They think withdrawal is a strategy to gain control. They are wrong. Silence is not a tactic. It is a state, and states are contagious. Carl Jung understood the psyche, not as a collection of thoughts, but as an energy system. Every emotion moves energy. Every reaction spends it. Every fixation drains it. And most people are living in energetic debt. They spend more than they generate. They react more than they integrate. They give more than they recover. And eventually, something collapses. Burnout, anxiety, depression, emotional numbness. But this collapse does not happen randomly. It happens because energy is being misused. Jung called this misdirection of libido, not sexual desire, life force, attention, emotional investment, psychic charge. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. And where your energy flows repeatedly, your identity forms. So ask yourself carefully, where does your energy go? Every day? Into conversations that lead nowhere? Into people who never change? Into explaining yourself to those who already decided how they see you? Into defending your intentions to people who enjoy misunderstanding you? This is not bad luck. This is leakage. And leakage creates weakness, not moral weakness, energetic vulnerability. And here is the part few people want to hear. Manipulative individuals do not create this vulnerability. They detect it. They don't need to plan. They sense. They feel. Who reacts quickly? Who explains compulsively? Who absorbs emotional tension? They don't need cruelty. They just apply pressure. And you do the rest. You fill the silence. You justify. You chase clarity. You try to restore balance. But balance was never the goal. Control was. And control does not require dominance. It requires predictability. If I know, you will respond emotionally. I can disturb you anytime. If I know, you feel guilty for saying no. I can ask endlessly. If I know you fear abandonment, I can withdraw and watch you chase. This is not always conscious. Often, it is instinctive, because unresolved trauma recognizes unresolved trauma. Jung spoke about complexes, clusters of emotional memory, that hijack behavior. When someone touches a complex, you don't respond as an adult. You respond as a wound. And wounds are reactive. That is why you say things you regret. That is why you explain too much. That is why you give more than you receive. Not because you are weak, but because a complex was activated. And opportunistic people learn very quickly which complexes to press. Abandonment, rejection, worthlessness, guilt. They don't need to threaten you. They just withdraw affection. They don't need to insult you. They just imply disappointment. They don't need to demand. They just wait for you to offer. And you do, again and again, because your psyche was trained to believe that restoring connection is more important than protecting yourself. But Jung warned about this. What you do not make conscious controls you. As long as your reactions are automatic, you are not free. You are programmed. And here is the critical shift. When you become silent, you interrupt the program. When you do not react, you stop feeding the complex. And complexes starve without energy. This is why silence feels uncomfortable at first. Your psyche is not used to holding energy. It is used to releasing it, explaining, fixing, responding. Silence feels like pressure because it is containment. Energy builds, and where energy builds, power forms. But power is frightening when you are not used to it, because power attracts attention, and attention invites challenge. The moment you stop reacting, people test you. They provoke. They escalate. They try new tactics. They may accuse you of being cold. They may dramatize. They may suddenly become emotional. Why? Because your silence removes their access, and loss of access creates anxiety. This is not about you. It is about the collapse of a dynamic that benefited them. When you were reactive, they felt safe. When you are contained, they feel exposed, because now they must sit with their own emotions, their own insecurity, their own emptiness, and many cannot tolerate this. Jung said that people avoid themselves at all costs. They distract, they project, they control, and you were their distraction. Your reactions kept them from feeling. Your availability kept them regulated. So when you withdraw, they experience withdrawal symptoms, irritation, anxiety, anger, and they blame you, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped carrying what was never yours. This is the moment most people break. They return to old behavior to restore peace. They respond, they explain, they apologize, and the system stabilizes again, but at their expense. Jung would call this a failure of individuation, because individuation requires tolerating tension, the tension between who you were and who you are becoming, between pleasing and being authentic, between connection and self-respect. Most people choose connection, even if it costs them their soul. But you are here because something in you is tired of that bargain. You are tired of being emotionally available to people who are never truly present. You are tired of explaining yourself to those who enjoy misunderstanding. You are tired of feeling drained after every interaction. And this exhaustion is not accidental. It is the signal that your energy is being misallocated. Jung believed that psychic energy must circulate inward as much as outward. If all energy flows outward, the self collapses. You become hollow, dependent, reactive. But when energy is conserved, something radical happens. You begin to feel grounded, centered, less shaken, not because the world changed, but because you did. You stop chasing resolution. You stop needing closure. You stop trying to control how others perceive you. And this is where real fear emerges, because now you must sit with ambiguity. You must accept being misunderstood. You must allow others to think whatever they want. This is terrifying for the persona, because the persona exists to be seen in a certain way, but Jung taught that the persona must eventually be sacrificed, not destroyed, relativized, put in its place, because living entirely from the persona means living for others, and silence is how the persona dissolves, not through rebellion, but through non-participation. You stop performing, you stop proving, you stop reacting, and without your participation, the play collapses. But now comes a darker realization. Some people will not let go easily because your reactivity was not just convenient, it was essential to their psychological balance. They fed on your energy, not consciously, but compulsively. Jung spoke about psychic vampirism, not in mystical terms, but psychological ones. People who cannot generate inner stability seek it externally. They attach, they drain, they provoke, and they panic when the source withdraws. This is when manipulation becomes visible, guilt tripping, victimization, emotional accusations. You've changed. You don't care anymore. You're selfish. These statements are not reflections. They are attempts to restore access, to pull you back into the old role. And this is the test. If you defend yourself, you re-enter the system. If you explain, you validate their entitlement. If you argue, you give them energy. But if you remain silent, something irreversible happens. The projection breaks. They can no longer use you as a container for their unresolved material. And this creates rage, not always outward, sometimes passive, sometimes cold, sometimes dramatic, but always revealing. Jung said that projection ends when the projected object refuses to carry it. Your silence is that refusal, and refusal is power, not aggressive power, sovereign power, the power to say, I will not participate in what diminishes me. But understand this clearly. Silence does not mean emotional shutdown. It does not mean indifference. It means choice. You are no longer hijacked. You are no longer automatic. You respond when it aligns. You withdraw when it doesn't. And this selectivity reshapes your entire life. Your relationships change. Your pace slows. Your inner world expands. But also, loneliness appears because many relationships were built on reaction, not resonance. And when reaction disappears, so do they. This loneliness is not punishment. It is purification. Jung knew this phase well. He lived it. Isolation is the womb of individuation, because only alone can you hear yourself without interference. Only in silence can you recognize which Desarestes voices are yours and which were borrowed. And here is the paradox. The more you conserve energy, the less you need others to validate you, and the less you need validation, the more grounded you become. People feel this. They may not understand it, but they sense it. Your presence changes. You speak less, but when you speak, it lands. You react slower, but when you act, it is deliberate. You are no longer pulled. You choose. And choice is the essence of freedom. But freedom comes with a price. You must endure being disliked, misunderstood, excluded. You must accept that some people only loved your availability, not you. And letting go of that illusion is painful, but necessary, because a life built on constant reaction is not a life. It is a service. And you were not born to be an emotional resource. You were born to be whole. In the next section, we will go even deeper into projection, into how people use you as a mirror to avoid themselves, into why your silence forces others to face their shadow, and why this confrontation often turns you into a target. Because when you stop reacting, you don't just change yourself, you destabilize the unconscious world of others. And not everyone will forgive you for that. But that is where true sovereignty begins. At some point, you will notice something unsettling. Your silence does not create peace. It creates tension, not inside you, inside others. And this is where the real psychological dynamic reveals itself. Because silence does not exist in a vacuum. It acts. It presses. It exposes. Carl Jung understood that human relationships are rarely about who we are. They are about what we represent, about what we carry for others, about what they cannot carry for themselves. This is why projection is so powerful. People project their fears, their needs, their unresolved wounds, and they need a surface for those projections. They need a mirror. And when you are emotionally available, reactive, responsive, you become that mirror. A perfect one, smooth, reflective, non-resistant. They see in you what they cannot face in themselves, and you accept it, not consciously, but psychologically, because you were trained to carry, to understand, to absorb. But the moment you withdraw, the mirror cracks. And what happens? When a mirror breaks, the image collapses, and the person must finally look inward. This is why your silence feels aggressive, not because it is, but because it removes the illusion. When you stop reacting, people lose their emotional anchor. They no longer know who they are in relation to you. And this is deeply destabilizing. Some respond with confusion, others with anger, others with drama, but all responses have one thing in common. They are attempts to restore the old projection, to pull you back into the role. Think carefully. Who in your life becomes hostile when you are calm? Who escalates when you don't? Who accuses you of cruelty when you simply remain silent? This is not about communication. This is about control. Because as long as you react, they can define you. They can say, you are emotional, difficult, needy, too sensitive. But when you withdraw, they lose the narrative. And people panic when they lose narrative control. Jung spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Insecurities, envy, dependence, aggression. These parts do not disappear. They seek expression. And when they cannot be owned, they are projected onto partners, friends, colleagues, and often onto the most available person, the one who listens, the one who reacts, the one who stays. You were not chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you were open. But openness, without boundaries, invites invasion. And once you stop allowing it, the shadow has nowhere to go. So it turns outward, at you. Suddenly, you are accused. Suddenly, you are blamed. Suddenly, you are labeled cold, arrogant, changed. But Jung warned us, when someone reacts strongly to your individuation, it is because you touched their shadow. Your silence forces them to sit with themselves. And most people cannot tolerate that. They need distraction. They need drama. They need emotional movement to avoid inner stillness. Your stillness is unbearable to them because in stillness, their inner noise becomes loud. And instead of facing it, they attack the source. This is why withdrawal is misinterpreted as punishment, but it is not. It is simply absence, absence of reaction, absence of supply. And this reveals something dark. Some relationships only exist because of emotional extraction, not connection. Extraction. They take your attention, your empathy, your reassurance, and give very little in return. But you didn't notice because you were focused on maintaining harmony. Jung would say, you were possessed by a complex, the rescuer, the peacekeeper, the understanding one. And possession always feels virtuous until it drains you, until you wake up exhausted, until your inner world feels empty. And the moment you stop feeding the complex, the people who benefited from it become hostile, not because you betrayed them, but because you stopped betraying yourself. This is where the guilt intensifies. You begin to question yourself. Am I being cruel? Am I being unfair? Am I becoming selfish? And here is where most people return. They apologize. They explain. They reopen access. Because guilt is a powerful leash. But Jung understood guilt. He knew that much of it is socially conditioned, a tool to keep individuals aligned with the collective, to prevent separation, to prevent individuation. Because individuation is disruptive, it breaks patterns, it exposes dependencies, it reveals who is never truly relating. So the collective resists it. And that resistance comes through people, through accusation, through emotional pressure, through silent punishment. But if you endure it, something extraordinary happens. Your inner authority strengthens. You no longer need external permission. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer need to justify your inner boundaries. You begin to trust yourself. And trust is the foundation of sovereignty. This is where your silence transforms. It is no longer defensive. It becomes neutral. And neutrality is terrifying because it cannot be manipulated. You are no longer opposing. You are no longer complying. You are simply not available. And this short circuits most manipulation tactics because manipulation relies on reaction, emotion, engagement, but neutrality offers none. And now, people reveal themselves. Those who were genuine adjust. They respect. They meet you where you are. Those who were extracting escalate. They push harder. They dramatize. They accuse. And this distinction becomes undeniable. This is when relationships split, not violently, quietly, naturally. And this quiet separation is painful because you lose familiarity. You lose routine. You lose the illusion of closeness, but you gain something else. Clarity. You see who was aligned with you and who was aligned with your availability. This clarity cannot be undone, and it changes how you move. You become slower, more deliberate. You listen more. Then you speak. You feel less urgency, less pressure to respond. And with this slowing down, your perception sharpens. You notice patterns you missed before. How certain people only contact you when they need something. How others disappear when you stop initiating. How some provoke just to feel you again. These patterns were always there, but your reactivity kept you blind. Now you see, and seeing is irreversible. Jung said that consciousness expands through confrontation, and this confrontation is happening now. You are confronting the reality of your relationships, not through analysis, through experience, and it hurts because you realize how much energy you gave away, how much of yourself was spent maintaining dynamics that never truly nourished you. Grief emerges, not for others, for yourself, for the years you lived externally, for the moments you silenced your intuition, for the boundaries you ignored. And this grief is necessary because without grief, there is no integration. Jung believed that individuation requires mourning, mourning the false self, mourning the persona, mourning the roles you played to survive. And silence is where this mourning happens. Not loudly, internally. You sit with yourself, without distraction, without constant interaction. And at first, this feels empty, lonely, uncomfortable. But slowly, something else appears. Presence. You feel yourself again. Your thoughts slow. Your body relaxes. Your inner dialogue softens. And you realize how noisy your life was. Not externally, internally. Constantly responding, constantly adjusting, constantly managing others. Now that stops. And this stillness is not passive. It is potent because now your energy begins to circulate inward. You feel more contained, more solid, less scattered. And others feel this. They may not comment, but their behavior shifts. They treat you differently, with more caution, more respect, or more distance, but never indifference. Because contained energy creates gravity, and gravity changes dynamics. This is why some people suddenly fear you, not because you threaten them, but because you no longer need them. Need. is leverage. And when need disappears, control collapses. This is where you become a mystery, not intentionally, but organically. You are no longer readable. Your reactions are not immediate. Your emotions are not obvious. Your intentions are not transparent. And mystery is unsettling because people cannot predict you. They cannot prepare. They cannot manipulate. So they either withdraw or attempt to dominate. And this is the final test. When someone tries to reassert control through guilt, through fear, through emotional intensity, if you remain silent, the dynamic breaks permanently because now they are forced to face themselves. And not everyone survives that confrontation. Some relationships end here, not with closure, but with fading. And this fading is painful, but it is also clean. No drama, no explosion, just distance. And distance creates perspective. You look back and see clearly. You were never loved for who you were becoming. You were loved for who you were accessible. And accessibility is not intimacy, it is convenience. Jung knew this. He warned against confusing familiarity with depth. True depth requires autonomy, two whole individuals, not one regulating the other. And by withdrawing, you reclaim wholeness. But this wholeness comes with solitude. And solitude is not romantic. It is raw. It exposes your own emptiness, your own fears, your own unmet needs. And now, you cannot distract yourself with others. You must face them. This is the darkest part of the process, because now you see your own shadow, your dependency, your need for validation, your fear of being unseen. And this confrontation is unavoidable, but it is also liberating, because once you see it, you can integrate it. You no longer need others to fill you. You begin to self-regulate, self-validate, self-anchor. And this changes everything. You are no longer reactive because there is nothing to defend. You are no longer available because you are complete. And completeness is quiet, unassuming, but powerful. Now let's move into the final transformation. What is born after silence, after solitude, after the rupture? How the loneliness of the strong becomes freedom. How you return to the world without losing yourself. And why, once you reach this stage, you will never again be controlled by reaction, because you have learned the most dangerous skill of all, how to be whole without an audience. Eventually, something remarkable happens. Silence stops being uncomfortable. The tension around you does not provoke anxiety. It becomes a signal that you have reclaimed something fundamental: your energy, your presence, your sovereignty. In stillness, clarity emerges. You no longer need to chase approval. You no longer need to explain. You no longer need to justify your existence. You begin to feel something rare: autonomy, not in the sense of isolation, but in the sense of self-possession. Every thought, every feeling, every reaction is filtered through a new lens. You respond because it aligns. You act because it resonates. You engage because it nourishes. Everything else falls away, and the world notices. Not immediately, not with words, but in subtle ways. They pause when you enter a room. They measure their approach. They sense that something has shifted. You are no longer predictable. You are no longer a vessel for their unresolved emotions. You are no longer accessible on demand. And this is the turning point. Because control, as Jung observed, is fragile. It relies on consistency, predictability. When you refuse to be predictable, control dissolves. And people panic. Some withdraw. Some lash out. Some attempt to reassert the old dynamic. But the difference now is unmistakable. You do not move for them. You do not react for them. You do not justify yourself. You only act from your own center. And this is liberation. A liberation that is invisible at first, because the world is conditioned to value availability over presence. But what you feel inside is unmistakable. It is wholeness. You start to notice something profound. Your energy is your own. It is no longer spent maintaining narratives that never served you, no longer wasted on emotional extraction, no longer dispersed to satisfy the expectations of others. It is concentrated, contained, protected, and from this containment, power emerges naturally. You speak less, you act with purpose, you choose where your attention goes, and those who were once used to draining you notice immediately. Some try to provoke, some attempt subtle manipulations, some confront you with accusations. You've changed, you're cold, you're selfish, and you notice something else. These words reveal more about them than they ever could about you. Their frustration is a mirror. Their irritation exposes dependency. Their neediness displays the energy they lack themselves. And now you watch, calmly, because nothing can destabilize you that you haven't already faced within. This is what Jung called individuation, becoming whole, separate from the collective expectation, unfazed by projection, free from compulsion. And you start to realize the silence, the withdrawal, the restraint. It was never about others. It was about you, your reclamation, your integration, your sovereignty. Because when you stop being available to everyone, the world does not end. It recalibrates. Some connections dissolve. Some people leave. Some dynamics collapse. And that is exactly how it should be. Because you are no longer participating in relationships that were never genuine. You are no longer giving energy to those who never respected it. You are no longer sacrificing your inner peace for the illusion of acceptance. And the truth is simple, yet terrifying. Your value increases, not because you have changed, but because you are no longer accessible to be used. When energy is scarce, it is respected. When presence is deliberate, it is felt. When boundaries are firm, they are honored. You have become rare. You have become necessary. You have become unforgettable. And in this state, the world around you shifts naturally. People adjust. Patterns correct themselves. Relationships that were authentic endure. Those that were dependent dissolve. And the liberation you feel is unshakable. It is quiet. It is sovereign. It does not seek validation. It does not demand recognition. It simply exists. And from this existence, you can finally act with clarity. Not reaction, not compulsion, but purpose. Your attention goes to what truly matters. Your energy is invested only where it nurtures. Your presence becomes selective, deliberate, and powerful. And in this, you are no longer a mirror for someone else's unresolved shadow. You are no longer a participant in unconscious manipulation. You are whole. You are grounded. You are free. But the journey is not over. Because freedom requires discipline. It requires vigilance. You must continue to protect your energy, to observe your triggers, to refuse automatic reaction, to maintain the clarity you have gained. And this is where the most profound transformation occurs. You realize that the world no longer controls you. You no longer react out of fear. You no longer chase validation. You no longer bend to expectation. You have become the architect of your inner life. Your sovereignty is absolute. And with sovereignty comes responsibility. Responsibility to yourself, to your energy, to your integrity. Because this is the essence of power. Not domination, not coercion, not manipulation, but self-possession. And once you inhabit this state fully, you will notice something else. The people who truly belong to your life stay. They meet you in the space you have created. They align with your rhythm. They respect your boundaries. They no longer take you for granted. And those who were never aligned, they fade, without drama, without force, without regret. Because the truth is, you cannot give yourself away to people who do not deserve you. And when you accept this, your life transforms. The energy you once wasted is now available to build, to create, to live fully, authentically, without compromise. Your relationships deepen. Your presence intensifies. Your clarity becomes magnetic. And every choice you make is grounded in self-respect. Every word you speak carries weight. Every action you take is deliberate because you no longer live reactively. You live consciously. And this is where the final lesson lies. The world only respects what it cannot always have. The world only values what is scarce. The world only notices what is contained. Your energy is sacred. Your time is finite. Your presence is a gift. And the moment you stop giving it away blindly, you reclaim your life. You reclaim your freedom. You reclaim yourself. So I ask you now, with clarity, are you ready to stop being reactive? Are you ready to protect your energy? Are you ready to become sovereign over your own life? If the answer is yes, start now. Do not wait. Do not apologize for your absence. Do not explain your silence. Begin observing your reactions. Begin choosing where your energy flows. Begin withdrawing from what does not serve you.